Hello, this is Lady Boulay, and thank you for clicking on Black American Lineage. Thank you for all of the support you're giving this channel. And today, we're going back to the past, all the way back to the Revolutionary War. And we're going to talk about the black men that fought in the Revolutionary War. The Revolutionary War is also known as the War of Independence and was fought between 1775 and 1783. The war was fought between the 13 colonies and Great Britain, which represented the British Crown. The problem was taxation without representation. The British were taxing the colonies and forcing a lot of unwanted tea on them and expecting them to pay taxes on that tea. So to make a long story short, they decided they weren't going to do it. So the British sent a whole lot of tea into the large ports in New York, Philadelphia, and Boston. Well, when they got to Boston, they decided not only were they not going to buy the tea, but they were going to throw the tea overboard. So that was called the Boston Tea Party, when they threw all that tea overboard into Boston Harbor, and that set off the Revolutionary War. So backing up for some important details, in 1775, black people were enslaved in the 13 colonies because it wasn't the United States yet. The role that black people played in the Revolutionary War was that the British promised the enslaved people that if they fought on their side, that they would free them when the war was over. So when the war was over, even though Great Britain lost, and the Sons of Liberty, as they call themselves, won, the British kept their word, and the enslaved people that fought on their side were free. Well, the British no longer had control over the colonies, but Canada was a colony of Great Britain. So those enslaved people moved to Canada, to the province of Nova Scotia. So Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, the wrestler turned actor's father's family, were from Nova Scotia. I'm assuming that his family was a part of that group that fought in the Revolutionary War. So that brings us to the black men that fought in the Revolutionary War. So we all recognize this as Crispus Attucks. Historians say that he is the first man, not the first black man, but the first man to die in the Revolutionary War. According to historians, he was a middle-aged, runaway enslaved man of African and Native American descent who worked as a sailor and a rope maker. Crispus Attucks was in the first scuffle between the Sons of Liberty and the British, and they say he was the first to fall. They don't tell us what he was doing, but he was a hero for some reason. And I also do not believe he was a runaway slave. I believe he was a free black, and I believe he was working in his own business. He became a part of the fight because he was a part of the fight. So I don't believe everything that historians say. I don't know why I don't believe that, but I do not believe that Crispus Attucks was a runaway slave. This is Salem Poor, and he is called a patriot soldier. Salem Poor began life as a Massachusetts slave and ended it as an American hero. Born into bondage in the late 1740s, he purchased his own freedom 2 decades later for 27 pounds, the equivalent of a few $1,000s today. Soon after, he joined the fight for independence. Enlisting multiple times, he is believed to have fought in the battles of Saratoga and Monmouth. He's most famous, however, for his heroism at the Battle of Bunker Hill, where his contributions so impressed fellow soldiers that after the war ended, 14 of them formally recognized his excellent battle skills with a petition to the General Court of Massachusetts. In the petition, they called him out as a brave and gallant soldier, saying he behaved like an experienced officer. Poor is credited in that battle with killing British Lieutenant Colonel James Abercrombie along with several other enemy soldiers. Colonel Ty earned the name of Loyalist Guerrilla. Now, they don't give a first name, they just say Colonel Ty. Next up is Colonel Ty. Colonel Ty earned the name Loyalist Guerrilla. Colonel Ty earned a reputation as the most formidable guerrilla leader in the Revolutionary War. Now that's something serious. If they call him the most formidable soldier in that war, that tells you a lot about this man. During his years fighting for the British, patriots who called themselves Sons of Liberty, which we now call Americans, feared his raids, while their slaves welcomed their help in their liberation. So this man was fighting, winning, and liberating the slaves. Ty, originally known as Titus during his early years in slavery in New Jersey, escaped a particularly brutal master in 1775 and joined the British Army after the Crown, the British, offered freedom to any enslaved person who enlisted. While Ty stood out as a soldier from the start, the British didn't station him at pitched battles. They saw more value in using his knowledge of the coveted New Jersey territory, which sat between British-occupied New York and the Patriots' center of government in Philadelphia. The Redcoats, the British were called the Redcoats. The Redcoats needed to take this middle land and believed Ty could help. The British were right. Ty excelled at raid warfare. His familiarity with the area gave him an advantage in attacks on the Patriots' lands, and his daring, skillful execution kept his Black Brigade soldiers largely unscathed as they plundered homes, took supplies, freed slaves, and sometimes even assassinated cruel slaveholders. Wow! The British recognized Ty's impact on their success and, out of respect for all of his contributions, bestowed on him the honorific title of Colonel. He remains an important symbol of fearless resistance. Wow, wow, wow. I never heard of this man. And I have studied American history, and I have had African American studies. I never heard of him, but I'm glad to finally meet him. A true hero. Here we have the 1st Rhode Island Regiment, the Integrated Revolutionary Force. This force is not integrated. They have a bunch of black men fighting under the command of a white man. In those days, white men did not want to fight with black men. But unlike the British, the Patriots, or the Sons of Liberty, as they call themselves, they didn't want any black people fighting in the Continental Army. So George Washington, who was the commander-in-chief at that time, said that no blacks could serve. But their forces started dwindling and they didn't have enough men to fight. So a Rhode Island legislator said everybody got to fight. So he commissioned those black soldiers, saying that if they fought on the side of the Continental Army, they would be freed. Now, slavery did not end, so unlike the British, they didn't keep their word. Slavery did not end. Those black people were not freed at the end of the Revolutionary War. It was another 75 years when the Civil War was fought that the enslaved people were freed. But black people did what they thought was right at the time, and so they fought because they thought they were going to be freed, and they fought gallantly. So the Rhode Island Regiment was small, but they were very successful in their attacks against the British. The historians write that when they went to Virginia, where several other soldiers were fighting, they stood out. They were the best dressed, they handled the weapons better, and the most precise in all of their maneuvers. So this is the black guy showing out even in 1778. Historians have written about how well these men fought and how loyal they were and how they avenged the death of their commanding officer, killing all of the soldiers that were involved in the ambush of this Colonel Green. And here's our lady, the poet Phyllis Wheatley. I find it interesting that she was included as a warrior in the Revolutionary War. Phyllis Wheatley was a revolutionary intellectual who waged a war for freedom with her words. Captured as a child in West Africa, then taken to North America and enslaved, Wheatley had an unusual experience in bondage. Her owners educated her and supported her literary pursuits. In 1773, at around age 20, she became the first black woman and third woman to publish a book of poetry in the young nation. Shortly after that, her owners freed her. She was probably the first woman to publish a book of poetry, but whenever a black person comes up as being the first of something, then they'll go dig up some white people to put them ahead of the black person. Influential colonists read Wheatley's poems and lauded her talent. Her work, which reflected her close knowledge of the ancient classics as well as biblical theology, carried strong messages against slavery and became a rallying cry for abolitionists. Remember, Christians, Negroes, black as Cain, may be refined and join the angelic train. She also advocated for independence, artfully expressing support for George Washington's Revolutionary War in her poem. To His Excellency General Washington, who himself had been forced to end his formal education at age 11, appreciated Wheatley's support and extolled her talent. The commander even invited her to meet, explaining he would be happy to see a person so favored by the masses. So Phyllis Wheatley was writing about freedom and liberation and sticking the Bible in it and basically saying if you were a Christian, you wouldn't be holding somebody in bondage. So she was very clever in the way that she wrote, but she wrote it and they got the message. Last but not least, we have James Armistead Lafayette. James Armistead Lafayette was an enslaved man who served the Continental Army during the Revolutionary War under the name Marquis de Lafayette, and later received a legislative emancipation as a double agent. Now he served as a double agent in the Revolutionary War. Now you have to wrap your mind around that. For somebody to employ a man who was enslaved as an agent in the Revolutionary War, this man had to be brilliant. Okay? So as a double agent, he reported the activities of Benedict Arnold after he had defected to the British, and he received information about the British battle plan which led to the siege of Yorktown, which ended the Revolutionary War. So this man provided invaluable intelligence to the Americans who were calling themselves patriots. He fed the British false information while disclosing very accurate and detailed accounts to the patriots or the Americans who later became Americans. So what this is suggesting is that this man is the one who discovered that Benedict Arnold was a traitor to the patriots. So that puts this man in a whole different category than anybody else. Now we knew about Benedict Arnold being a traitor to the patriots or to the United States, we would say. But we didn't know that it was a black man who disclosed this information. So during the Revolutionary War, James Armistead's life changed drastically from an enslaved person in Virginia to a double agent passing intelligence and misinformation between the two warring sides. When Armistead joined the Patriots' efforts, they assigned him to infiltrate the enemy. So he pretended to be a runaway slave wanting to serve the crown and was welcomed by the British with open arms. At first, they assigned him menial support tasks, but he soon became a more strategic resource due to his vast knowledge of the local landscape. Armistead's role got more interesting when the British directed him to spy on the Patriots. Since his loyalty remained with the Patriots, he claimed to be bringing the British intelligence about the Continental Army, but he was actually pushing incorrect information to foil their plans. In the meantime, he was learning details of the British battle plans, which he brought back to his commander, General Marquis de Lafayette. This served the Americans well. Because of Armistead's efforts, they got the insight they needed to successfully execute the decisive siege of Yorktown, which effectively ended the war. Years later, after a testimonial from the French general helped secure Armistead's freedom, the former slave changed his surname to Lafayette. Now, when it was time for him to get a pension, they didn't want to give him a pension because they said he was a spy and not a soldier. So he had to petition the legislature to get a pension. So that's how grateful they were. But these are real heroes of the Revolutionary War. These people are no joke. They made a major contribution to the success of that war, just like black soldiers, men and women, played a vital part in the United States winning the Civil War. This is why America doesn't want to teach history the way it should be taught. They don't want this information out. They don't want black children to know what the contribution of their ancestors have been to this country, and they don't want white children to know. And that's pretty bad. But this is the main reason why they turn everything into something negative. Woke, or whatever it is they want to call it. Because they don't want the truth out. Thank you for watching the video. Thank you for your support. And as always, have a great day.